Welcome to the only place where everything is depressed. It's nirvana. Slowly drag. Listen.
Help your engine run cleaner and last longer with Seafoam Spray. Seafoam Spray cleans and lubricates critical upper engine areas where fuel cleaners can't go. It works fast through the upper intake to clean harmful deposits from intake valves and chamber areas. Seafoam Spray's patented hook guide makes it easy to spray into gas fuel injection throttle bodies or carburetor throats. Seafoam Spray is safe and easy to use in all types of tubes.
Welcome back, friends of the shop, on this very chilly Monday morning. I've got some bad news. We set out to start milling this morning, and the power head won't start. Something's wrong with it. So I thought I'd do a video on this because the process of figuring out why your small engine won't start is pretty simple. You just got to break it down to the three things you need for an engine to run, right? What's that? Fuel, air, and does it have ignition and power? So you start eliminating those things. There's a quick trick that you can do right off the bat to narrow down the bulk of it, and let's start with that. We'll see if it's going to be the spark or if it's a fuel. Here's how my granddad taught me how to distinguish real quickly if it's spark or if it's fuel. All right, so there's a couple things. These new engines, they've got sensors on them that if the oil gets low, it will kill the ignition. So check that. So if you have fuel and you've got plenty of oil in there, that's not the problem. What we can do is I'm just going to take a tiny little bit of gasoline here with the air cleaner off, and we'll pour it in there as we start it. Now, if the engine gets up and runs, by doing that, we could use starting fluid or different things. Then you know you've got a fuel problem, that the ignition is working, right? So let's try that real quick. I'll just pour a little bit in there. Don't get carried away here. And if it runs, then we know we've got a fuel issue. That's what we got. So spark's not a problem. Oh, goodness. All right, fuel it is. With the problem narrowed down to the fuel system here, I just started the source. Now, I always store these small engines empty without gas in them, so that kind of rules out the fact or the problem of varnish. Plus, I only burn non-ethanol fuel, so it's unlikely that that's the problem. But it could be these fuel filters. We got two fuel filters on here. If these fuel filters are clear, when we gravity feed it, we should run no problem. You can see that there's no problem there. Gas is flowing freely. This engine is a twin, and it's electronic fuel injection. It says here that there's a really fine 10 micron fuel filter. Keep clean. So the fuel line that was clear goes in here. So I guess the obvious place to check next is that fuel filter plugged up in there. In all honesty, I don't know what this thing is. It looks like a diaphragm fuel pump, but this being electronic fuel injection, I thought those systems required higher pressure than what you would get with this, but I don't know. let's get this thing up where we can actually work on it a little bit. If memory serves, and I think it does, when I turned this on back in when we used it, ignition on, I thought I remember hearing like a pump or something engaged, like an electric motor. So I'm looking at this. So this looks like it's a diaphragm pump of some sort, but then there's another fuel line running down here to what I can only assume is maybe some sort of a booster pump. And is that the thing? So I'm going to take this plug off. Let's test it and see if we have. Ooh, that's fragile, that plug. Of course. See if we have power to the pump. Maybe this is a bad. This is a bad piece here. All right, guys. I've done a little digging around in here. So apparently, the old Kohler has 2 fuel pumps. Now this is. I've never been into a fuel-injected engine like this before. We have some sort of a diaphragm pump going on right here, but another line.
H20.
What it looks like to me,
Don't
this
do
looks like
it.
it's a high-pressure
Yeah.
pump. And that, when I remember turning on the key
Bro,
and
what?
hearing what sounded like a fuel pump come on, I'll bet it's inside here. So, first thing we're going to do is, before we check that, I took that off. Now here is the wire, right? So when we turn on the ignition, right? The ignition's on now. That should start up the fuel pump, right? So we need to know, do we have power to the fuel pump, right? So this is just a regular 12-volt test light. There we have it. See, we have power there on the uphill side. So if we turn that ignition off, we should not have, that should kill the power. All right, so that's good news. So that tells us that we're producing power to the fuel pump.
Yes.
Do not open, it says. Well, before we open it, I'm guessing this is it right here. There's a fuel pump. I'm assuming that there's a fuel pump in here, probably same as an automotive fuel pump. So we got Granddad's old test wires. He always had, diagnosing cars from the 50s was a little bit different than today. Computers and all that. But this is the way he diagnosed 12-volt problems, right? These little alligator clips. These are right from his toolbox. Now we can test the fuel pump. This is what the fuel pump looks like in your car. You can test it the same way. We just have positive and a negative, right? It just sits in this little housing. And, I mean, it's very similar to the same thing you got to have on your car. There's a float right there with the needle valve. And as that drops, that opens the circuit and turns the pump on, or allows the fuel to flow. So I've got a battery mocked up here. So if we just take a positive, clip on here. Now this thing should spin and make a whole terrible racket. It'll run like crazy. Yeah, we've got 12-volt, even if I reverse polarity. So what that tells us is we got a battery.
Bro, how does not?
That's all there is to it. We got voltage here. Okay. All right. Well, let's run down to Napa. I'll take both these guys with me. I'm sure that's it. And maybe we can just replace this or the whole assembly, I guess.
It's just flawless, isn't it?
I think so.
I mean, I literally couldn't imagine a more.
We'll see. And how long would it take to get in?
Friday,
Friday?
but I'm really wary of the UPS system.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, let me check and I'll be back if I can't find it. Thank you. So my local Napa dealer didn't have it. They can get it on Friday. But I got a buddy who's got a rental shop down the road here, and he's got a bunch of small engines. He stocks lots of parts, so it might be worth a try. So I'll run down there and see if he's got one. If not, I'll just come back and order it through Napa. Well, good news and bad news. I went to my 2 local places. Neither one of them could get it. The soonest they could get it was like a week out, so I came home and ordered Amazon. Yeah, so they're going to have it here in 2 days. So we'll put this on the back burner, and we'll get back to that in 2 days. There was an aftermarket one, and there was an OEM one. The OEM one was $200. The aftermarket was $88. So I got the aftermarket one because I figured this has only got 43 hours on it for brand new. That's all the OEM lasted for a fuel pump. What we got to lose, right? All right, let's set this aside and we'll move on to our next project. Well, we're waiting on those sawmill parts. Let's get in to see how bad the damage is on the Yeti snow bike. Last Friday, those of you guys who saw the video, this of course is Jack's bike. My buddy Ray came up with me, used Jack's bike, and in case something hit a stump or something on the ground, it broke this whole cover off. Now, people were saying, how come that's such flimsy plastic? Well, I got to look it into a little bit, and this is the third generation of this, and they keep making them thicker and tougher. Apparently this is a sacrificial piece, so that this is to break instead of that there. So is it common? I don't know. We'll see, but hopefully it stops with that right there. So let's get into it and we'll swap this out and hopefully get back in action here. The reason why Ray and I were able to get back
Are you serious?
we were prepared. We had tools and repair things, everything we needed to make repairs. I had to take this out of my first aid kit. This was the repair. It was a SAM splint, which is just this piece of thin aluminum with foam. It's used for isolating broken limbs. But boy, they're handy. And we had to actually cover that all up to keep snow out of it because that was becoming a problem. One of the ways that a guy can be prepared when you're working on this stuff, just so you know that you always have the tools that you're going to need, you'll always work out of your toolkit. Meaning, use the tools that you're going to take with you in your pack. ATVs, boats, anything like that. So that when we're doing this, as we go through the whole process, any tool that I need, that I can't finish the job with, I'll know and be sure to add it. I guess you can work on this whole sled, this whole accessory with like 2 wrenches. Okay, I think that's the 6 bolts. That was it. I am very disappointed to say that this is the second project of the day that has miscarried. Focused here? There we go. So, this piece, as I said here, is designed, this is the 3rd generation, they keep making them thicker and tougher, this is a sacrificial piece that this breaks instead of breaking that expensive carbon tunnel. So, I don't know how often this is going to happen, right? So when this thing let go, when the other one broke, this whole bottom section got left up on the mountain somewhere, including all sorts of springs and clips. I mean, it just completely took everything with it, and everything is a la carte from the factory, right? So they don't sell it in assemblies, meaning you have to buy all these individual pieces.